Right now, at this very moment, something is happening around you that you cannot see. Not metaphorically, not as a matter of spiritual sentiment or poetic faith language, structurally, architecturally. Something with mass and consequence and direction is moving in the space you are occupying, responding to something you may or may not have done today. I want to tell you exactly what that is, and I want to tell you through the eyes of a man who could see it directly, who spent 50 years watching the invisible machinery of prayer operate with his own eyes in real time at a level of perceptual clarity that the Church has formally authenticated. My name is Raymond. I spent 35 years teaching Catholic theology at a high school in Covington, Kentucky. After attending a conference by Padre Pio in 2018, I spent the next several years doing what I should have done earlier, reading Padre Pio's actual letters, not the devotional summaries. Reading the documented testimony of his spiritual daughters, reading the accounts of the friars at San Giovanni Rotondo who watched him operate for half a century. And what I found in those letters and testimonies about prayer is not what I taught my students for 35 years. It is not wrong exactly. It is incomplete in the way that a map is incomplete when it only shows the surface and omits everything underneath. Stay with me, because what I am about to describe will change the way you pray tonight. Let me begin with something Padre Pio said that I encountered in the first volume of his letters, the Epistolario, in a letter to his spiritual director, Father Benedetto Nardella, written around 1912. He wrote, "When a soul lifts itself to God in prayer, it emits a light that the angels recognize. They respond to that light the way soldiers respond to a signal fire." When I first read that, I was sitting at my desk at about 10 in the evening. I set the book down. Because that is not the language of a man speaking in pious generalities. That is the language of a man describing something he has observed. And the question that stopped me was not whether it was true. The question was, why don't we pray as if it is? Now here is where I need to give you some structural context, because what Padre Pio was describing has a specific theological architecture. And once you understand the architecture, the mechanics of what he saw begin to make coherent sense. The tradition of the Church has always held that prayer is not merely an interior act of the soul oriented toward God. It is an act that moves through layers of reality that most of us have been trained, by culture, by habit, by a century of therapeutic frameworks, to treat as inaccessible. Padre Pio, in his systematic work on spiritual combat, describes what he calls the hierarchy of spiritual response. When a person prays with genuine faith, not performance, not obligation, but actual interior orientation toward God, the act itself constitutes what he calls a spiritual event, not a spiritual sentiment, an event, with causes, effects, and participants on both sides of the visible world. Padre Pio is precise about this distinction. A spiritual event is not measured by how the soul feels during prayer. It is measured by what the act of will initiates in the unseen order. The feeling may be dry, the room may feel empty, the words may feel mechanical. None of that determines whether the event occurred. The event is determined by the direction of the will. If the will is genuinely oriented toward God, even in aridity, even in distraction, even in exhaustion, the event happens. This is not a consolation prize for bad prayer. This is the architecture. Now let me tell you what Padre Pio said the first of those participants does. This is documented in the memoirs of Cleonice Morcaldi, one of Padre Pio's closest spiritual daughters. In La mia vita vicino a Padre Pio, she records a specific instruction he gave in spiritual direction that most people who quote Padre Pio have never encountered. He told her, "Do not pray alone. You are never alone when you pray. Your guardian angel is present at every act of prayer. But he is not merely present as a witness, he is present as a carrier." The word he apparently used in Italian was portatore, carrier. The angel carries your prayer. Now I want you to hold that image carefully, because the theology of angelic intercession is one of the most documented and least understood elements of the Catholic tradition. The Book of Revelation describes the 24 elders offering incense before the throne, and the incense is explicitly identified as the prayers of the saints. This is not metaphor in the way that most Christians read it. The structure of the text makes clear that the prayers of the faithful are presented as an offering in the heavenly liturgy by a distinct being operating within a distinct jurisdiction. In the Book of Tobit, one of the deuterocanonical books that Protestant Bibles removed in the 19th century, the angel Raphael reveals to Tobias, at the end of the narrative, something that stopped theologians for centuries. I am Raphael, one of the 7 who stand before the Lord, who present the prayers of the saints, not all angels, a specific class. 7 standing before the Lord, with a specific function, presenting the prayers of the saints before the throne. Padre Pio knew this text. He knew the tradition it was embedded in, and he had something the rest of us do not have. He could observe the mechanism operating in real time. Here is what he described, again from testimonies collected by Morcaldi, and confirmed across multiple accounts from the friars of San Giovanni Rotondo. When a person begins to pray with genuine faith, the guardian angel who has been present all along recognizes a specific shift in the interior disposition of the soul. Padre Pio described it as the soul opening, the way a window opens. Before prayer, the soul is directed inward or outward toward the world. In prayer, it orients itself upward toward God. And that reorientation is perceptible to the angel in a way that Padre Pio compared to light becoming visible in a dark room. The angel then performs an act. It is not passive witnessing. The angel takes the petition, not the words, but the intention behind the words, which Padre Pio distinguished carefully, and carries it upward into the invisible architecture of what the tradition calls the communion of saints. Stay with me here, because this is where it gets specific in a way that matters for how you pray. Padre Pio was once asked by a penitent. This is documented in multiple accounts, including Bernard Ruffin's biography, Padre Pio, The True Story, why he sometimes seemed to know what people needed before they spoke. The woman asking was expecting a mystical explanation, something about divine-infused knowledge. His answer was simpler and stranger. He said, "I knew because your angel came before you did." He explained, and Ruffin documents this from the accounts of witnesses present, that he could perceive the arrival of a person's guardian angel before the person themselves entered the church. The angel arrived carrying the person's need, and Padre Pio, whose own angel was present and attentive, received the communication the way one person receives a message delivered by a courier. I need you to sit with that for a moment. The implication of what Padre Pio described is this: when you pray for someone, your child who has left the faith, your husband who is struggling, your friend who is in physical danger, your guardian angel does not wait until you have finished the prayer to begin. The angel begins responding to the interior act of your will as you turn toward God, and it carries not only your words, but your love to the person you are praying for. Your angel goes before you. The way Padre Pio's description implied his penitents' angels went before them. Now, let me tell you about the second element of what Padre Pio described, the one that most Catholic content never mentions, because it is harder to frame in terms that are immediately comforting. He called it the resistance. There is a passage in the book of Daniel at chapter 10 that most Christians have read without understanding what it is actually describing. Daniel had been fasting and praying for 21 days, and then an angel appears and says something that has no comfortable explanation if you take it literally. I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me for 21 days. The prince of Persia in that passage is not a human political figure. The exegetical tradition of the Church, documented from Origen through Thomas Aquinas, identifies this figure as a demonic authority operating over a particular territory, a spiritual power with a specific jurisdiction that the prayer of Daniel was passing through. I want you to think about what that means. Daniel did not know his prayer was being resisted. He was fasting. He was persisting. He did not receive any confirmation, any consolation, any sign of movement. For 21 days, the heavens were apparently silent, and yet the angel says, "Your words were heard from the first day, from the first day." The resistance was not between Daniel and God. The resistance was occurring in the space between, in the invisible architecture of the unseen world, along the path the prayer was traveling. And the prayer was traveling the entire time. The angel was in motion the entire time. The silence Daniel experienced was not absence. It was war. The angel carrying Daniel's prayer encountered opposition, was resisted for 21 days. And then the archangel Michael came to help. That is not mythology. That is the architecture of the invisible world as described in Scripture, and Padre Pio saw it operating in the lives of the people who came to him. He described it this way in a letter to Frater Agostino Daniele, which appears in the 3rd volume of the Epistolario. The prayer of a faithful soul is like a thread of gold being drawn through water that does not wish to carry it. The water resists, but the thread reaches its destination because the one who holds the other end is stronger than any resistance. The thread of gold, the water that resists. Padre Pio was not speaking in abstraction. He spent 50 years watching those threads move. He watched the resistance. He watched the arrivals. He watched what happened at both ends. Now here is why this matters for you specifically. If you have been praying for something for months, for a marriage that is not healing, for a child who has not returned, for a health situation that has not turned, and the silence has been making you wonder whether prayer is doing anything at all, then Daniel chapter 10 is the answer that Padre Pio would have given you. The silence is not evidence of absence. It may be evidence of a fight. Your prayer is a thread of gold moving through water that does not wish to carry it, and the one holding the other end has not released it. Now let me tell you about the 3rd element, the one I find most extraordinary, and the one that Padre Pio spoke about most urgently in his letters to those he was directing: the perfume of prayer. I do not mean the rose perfume associated with Padre Pio's presence, though that is documented across thousands of accounts from across the world. I mean something different, something theological. In Revelation 5 verses 8 through 9, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fall before the Lamb. Each one has a harp and a golden bowl, and the text says explicitly, the golden bowls full of incense are the prayers of the saints. Gold bowls, full of incense, held before the throne. Your prayers are being held in a vessel before God, not discarded, not evaporated, not lost in the noise of the universe, held, accumulated, preserved. Padre Pio taught something that I had never encountered in 35 years of teaching Catholic theology, and when I found it in Morcaldi's memoir, I had to read it 3 times to be certain I was reading it correctly. He said that every prayer prayed with genuine faith and not yet answered is not delayed by accident. It is preserved in those vessels. It perfumes eternity. And when the moment of the answer arrives, when the timing is right in ways the person praying could not know, the prayer is released, not lost, not forgotten, released. He told Cleonis Morcaldi specifically, your prayers for the dead do not disappear when you stop saying them. They accumulate. They rest in the hands of those who were assigned to carry them. And when the soul who needed them reaches the moment of need, they are poured out. I want you to think about what that means for the prayers your grandmother prayed for you, the prayers your mother prayed during the years you were not living close to God, the prayers you prayed for someone who seemed not to respond, and whom you eventually stopped praying for because it seemed useless. Padre Pio said it was not useless. He said the bowls do not empty because we stop looking at them. Now here is where I need to tell you something personal. When my wife Margaret was diagnosed 3 years ago, in the spring, and she was gone by autumn, I went through a period of about 4 months in which I could not pray, not because I had stopped believing, because I had run out of words. Every form of prayer I knew felt like a performance I was no longer capable of, and in that silence, which was, I think, the most honest spiritual experience I had had in decades, I found something I had not expected, or rather, something found me. It was not consolation exactly. It was more like a recognition. I had been teaching for 35 years about prayer as a practice you do, as a discipline, as a form of spiritual exercise you perform and then evaluate. Good prayer, poor prayer, consistent, inconsistent. And what I found in those 4 months of silence was that prayer had been happening in me even when I had no words. That the orientation of the will toward God, which Padre Pio described as the soul opening, does not require vocabulary. It requires direction. And the direction of my soul had not changed even when the language stopped. The angel was still present. The carrier was still carrying, even in the silence. I did not know that until I could not pray the usual way. It took losing Margaret to understand what Padre Pio had been saying about the mechanism. And here is the other side of that recognition, which I think is equally important. Those 4 months of wordless prayer, that sustained orientation of the will toward God when I had nothing else to offer, those were in the bowls too. I did not know that at the time. But Padre Pio's teaching makes clear that the prayers of inarticulate grief, the prayers of people who have been praying for years with no apparent result and who are running out of the capacity to continue, those are not the least significant prayers in the bowls. They may be among the heaviest. Now, here is what Padre Pio taught about the difference between the prayer that reaches and the prayer that does not. This is critical, and it is the part of his teaching that most people who quote his famous line, "Pray, hope, and don't worry," have pulled out of its context and reduced to a slogan. In the same letter to Factor Benedetto Nardella, where he described the light the soul emits in prayer, he wrote something that deserves to be read very carefully. The prayer that reaches God is not the prayer of many words, but the prayer of a soul that has decided in this moment not to carry what it was carrying. Not the prayer of many words, the soul that has decided not to carry what it was carrying. What was it carrying? He meant the anxiety, the attempt to control the outcome, the underlying posture that frames the prayer, not as an orientation toward God, but as a transaction. I will offer this prayer, and I expect this result. The prayer that reaches, that sends the signal fire the angel recognizes, is the prayer that has, in the moment of uttering it, released the grip on the result. Not because the person doesn't care about the outcome. Padre Pio cared desperately about the people he interceded for. He prayed for individuals by name for years. He carried the weight of human suffering in ways that broke his body open. But the effective prayer, the prayer that moves in his description through the invisible architecture and reaches the throne, is the prayer of someone who, in that moment, has chosen to trust the destination over controlling the route. Pray, hope, and don't worry. That is not a slogan. It is a precise description of the interior state from which effective prayer originates. Now let me give you something specific and practical, because this is not a video about what Padre Pio saw as a spiritual curiosity. It is a video about how you pray tonight. There is a practice I began the winter after Margaret died, based on what I had been reading in the Epistolario and in Rippidge's work on the mechanics of spiritual intercession. I want to give it to you exactly as I do it, because it has changed not the volume of my prayer, but the quality of what I bring to it. I call it the threefold preparation. That is my name for it, not Padre Pio's. But every element of it comes directly from what he taught. The first element: before you pray, name what you are carrying, not what you are asking for. What you are carrying, write it down if you need to. The worry that has been sitting in your chest since Tuesday. The fear about your child that wakes you at 2 a.m. The grief you have not yet given a name to. Name it. Because what Padre Pio described, the soul opening turning upward, emitting the light the angel recognizes, does not happen when the soul is still gripping the burden. The opening requires the releasing, even if the releasing is incomplete. Even if you say, I am naming this and I am trying to let go of it, and I am not entirely sure I can. That honesty, Padre Pio said, is itself a form of prayer. He wrote to a directee, God does not require certainty from us. He requires honesty. The second element, direct your prayer to a specific saint or angel as carrier. This is not superstition. This is the structural reality of the communion of saints as Padre Pio understood it, as the bowls held before the throne, as the carriers assigned to specific functions. Ask your guardian angel. You do not have to know the name. The intention suffices to carry what you are offering. Ask Padre Pio himself if you are praying for something related to physical suffering or spiritual warfare. Ask the saint whose intercession seems most aligned with what you need. You are not replacing God with the angel or the saint. You are using the architecture that God established for this purpose. Raphael presented the prayers of the saints. Michael assisted when the carrier was resisted. The system has participants. Use them. If you are praying for someone who seems beyond reach, a child estranged for years, a spouse who has walked away from the faith entirely, ask Padre Pio's angel specifically. Morcaldi documented that Padre Pio instructed people to send their guardian angels to him when they could not come in person. The same principle applies in reverse. Send your love to the person you are praying for through the carrier assigned to the task. You are not inventing this channel. You are using the one Padre Pio described. The third element, end the prayer with a specific act of release. Padre Pio gave a formulation to multiple directees, recorded in slightly different versions by Morcaldi and by Frater Agostino Daniele. It goes something like this: Lord, I have said what I need to say. I trust you with what comes next. I release the result into your hands, not because I do not care, but because your hands are safer than mine. Say something like that, in whatever words come naturally, but say something that is functionally a release, because what Padre Pio described about effective prayer, the thread of gold that passes through the resistance and reaches its destination, is a thread that has been let go at one end. You hold it out. You do not grip it from both ends and wonder why it doesn't move. Now I want to tell you one more thing. The thing I find most consoling in everything Padre Pio said about the unseen world of prayer. He was once asked, and this is documented in multiple sources, including Ruffin's biography, whether the prayers of the dead can still reach us, whether the prayers that Margaret or your grandmother or your mother prayed for you before they died still have any power in the world you inhabit now. He said yes. He said it without hesitation. He said, "The dead who loved us do not stop loving us because they have changed location, and love, when it has been purified enough to enter the presence of God, becomes a form of intercession that has no parallel in the prayers of those still carrying the weight of the body. Your grandmother's prayers for you prayed 40 years ago are not gone. They are in the bowls. They are being held. They are perfuming eternity in ways you cannot measure from where you stand. And the prayers you pray tonight, for your children, for your marriage, for the person you are afraid for, will not evaporate when you close your eyes and the room goes quiet. They will be carried. Right now, at this very moment, something is happening around you that you cannot see. An angel has been present since before you began watching this. It has been waiting, as Padre Pio described, the way a carrier waits with a letter already in hand, for the moment when the soul opens. Before you sleep tonight, I want you to try something simple. Sit still for 2 minutes. No music. No ambient sound if you can manage it. Name out loud. Just say it aloud in the room, even if it feels strange. One thing you have been carrying this week that you have not yet given to God. One worry, one fear, one grief. Name it. Then say, I am releasing this now. I am handing it to the one who holds the other end. Then be quiet for 30 seconds. That is it. That is the entire practice for tonight. You do not have to be certain it works. You do not have to feel anything. Padre Pio was very clear on this. The effective prayer is not the prayer that feels effective. It is the prayer of a soul that has decided in this moment to trust the destination. The thread of gold does not need you to watch it travel. It needs you to let go. Take this with you tonight. God bless you, and stay vigilant.